when I hear you play and when I see you play, that's a special quality that I see in your playing. Like, there are many special qualities, of course, but the essence of flow, in regardless if there's time or a free pulse, rubato, whatever, there's always a flow, and everything is integrated in that flow, everything that you do. And therefore, there's a possibility always to really lock in, but also to open up. And I love that.
I mean, that's, to me, that's why you want to be as familiar as possible with, different rhythmic possibilities and stuff like that, so that you can play with it, and just be comfortable making the music do different things. Like I said, I'm not really an autopilot player, so I don't really have like a generally speaking, it's like, okay, yeah, give me a rock beat or whatever. Like, generically speaking, is like, okay, I think I could achieve whatever texture is needed for a given situation. That being said, I'm not really approaching the music from like a genre standpoint,
Yeah.
And so it's like, how can you again complement the music that you're playing, but still be free to flow on the music another kind of way, I don't know, especially with drums, I just never want to sound like an exercise, So it's tricky. So that, to me, that's the trickiest thing in terms of trying to incorporate certain things. It's like, how do you do that without sounding like a metronome or inorganic, So yeah, so it's interesting. So I mean, and I think that's where, just coming in, listening to different music, different ways that different cultures and instruments approach flow,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the certain musicians, especially drummers, that have a quality like, somebody like a Billy Higgins, I mean, he's got one of the smoothest flows, and he played all kind of different types of music, like the boogaloo shuffle type of stuff that he did with Lee Morgan, which was like the pop music of the time, mind you, but it still was like happening though. It was, this is what I'm talking about, how he was able to capture that texture and give you that groove, but it was still like it still had a flavor, it wasn't like an autopilot, like autopilot. Okay, we're gonna play this kind of song now. So then it's like, okay, I have my generic groove that I worked out for that song, and now I'm gonna play this. It's like, up to a point, obviously you have to have a understanding of the flow that you're in at a given time, but then you want to be able to be present, and be able to, I'm always, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to sound more organic than digital.
Yeah. But the thing is, the general trend goes
totally.
goes into
digital, everything
totally opposite direction.
That's the premier thing, is to sound as digital as possible, and I it's cool, it's just not, that's not how I naturally, I'm more, organic, man. How does the universe work, and that kind of thing, it's more metaphysical. So in rhythm, they all work together. It all works together too, And what does that sound like? What is free? What is time? I mean, I was checking out some material where it was like, time isn't even a thing. This whole system that we're basing our lives on isn't real, And also too, with rhythm, it's almost like language in a lot of ways, where you could have a saying in one language, and then you translate it doesn't necessarily translate. You know,
Mm.
rhythm is a lot like that too. You know, because
Mm.
especially how that's one of the driving forces as far as how they create a category or a genre, right? Because it's how the flow, it's how the rhythm is moving, and that's the thing that distinguishes what it is, you know. So if it's quote unquote hip hop, then that's going to be a certain sound or flow. If I say rock, then that's going to be a certain sound or flow that the average person is going to equate with that, you know, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, all music is either moving off of a straight eighth note flow or a broken dotted eighth note tied to 16th broken triplet flow, or
Mm.
some combination, you know, some, like when you start going into places like Brazil or something like New Orleans and some of these places where it's like in between, it's
Yeah.
like riding, you know. So that's interesting, you know. I mean, any music around the world, you know, you can see it's gonna be based off of, it's like the white and black keys on the piano, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting just checking that out, you know. But obviously, when we're talking about quote unquote jazz, where a majority of the flow is actually coming from the ride cymbal, you know. Um, and if you see all the greats, you know, they all have a distinct flow ride cymbal, you know. And so that's why I bring up Billy Higgins, because I mean it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
you know, he doesn't get enough attention. I mean, that could be a study. If you want to open a school, it's like, yeah, this is the Billy Higgins class. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
break down mechanics, break down the texture that he's getting, you know. And I love the way that yeah, his flow, you know. And the thing that's beautiful about it is he's always got something going on, you know,
Yeah.
but it's never in the way.
Mm-hmm.
But he's always doing something. There's always, you know, it's, but the flow is always happening.
Yeah.
So how do you know, how's that? Because then you hear other examples where it's like, okay, that dude is playing a lot of shit, like
Yeah.
busy, you know. He doesn't ever sound busy, but it's active, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's flow, it's smooth, it's flowing, you know. And obviously there's different examples of flow, you know. That's just one that I happen to like, but there's several, you know. I mean, actually, if you check everybody out, it's like, oh, you know, and you key in on that aspect, how they're making the music flow while still executing, you know, different things that they're doing to complement, you know, what they might be doing at that time.
When you think of Billy Higgins right now, what record comes to mind right away?
Oh man, several. But one, uh, Let Freedom Ring, a Jackie McLean record. Let Freedom
Mm-hmm.
Ring. Then there's another one, Jackie McLean record, Dr. Jackal.
Mm-hmm.
It's that those are two nice ones. But then, I mean, yeah, with Billy Higgins, man, you can't go wrong. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
Lee
I was
Morgan,
just thinking about what when you talk about
yeah,
him and especially that phenomenon of flow
Lee
and
Morgan.
his speed.
This
Yeah.
is work with Lee Morgan. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Ornette. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
work with Ornette that he did, like Shape of Jazz to Come. You know,
Yeah.
it's man, um, yeah, those records come to mind offhand. Um, but anything with Billy Higgins is like, you know, uh, yeah, it it musicality is yeah, it's a study. You know, if you're really studying the instrument, it's like he's like a branch that should be checked out. You
Oh yeah.
know.
Yeah. I can really resonate with what you said. Also, like him and his personality was somehow so open in itself that he could do his thing in totally different circumstances,
Yeah, you
not
know,
genres, just musical
yeah, this
circumstances
is, yeah,
in situations.
Yeah, and that's what it is ultimately, and I like that, Ray Haynes is kind of like that too,
Yeah.
Ray Haynes is kind of like that too. There's a couple of players that where it's like they're actually the first dudes like that was Max and Art Blakey.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you check it out, a lot of the like recordings, a lot of the early Monk recordings, and like
Oh
and
yeah.
like recordings like Herbie Nichols, like anybody that was
Mm-hmm.
doing something that was like supposedly outside of the norm kind of thing, it's those guys that are on the records, And then Max, forget about it. I mean, he's on all kinds of like stuff with different.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. It's like he gets coined in this bebop box, but I mean, it's like,
Yep.
it's such a broad. So that's why it's tricky. Once you get into
Yeah.
start putting stuff in the boxes, then you don't really see what that person actually really did.
Mm.
Yeah, that's what he did at that point, and that's what he was dealing with. But I mean, that was just the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
He was just getting started, literally, So it's like, yeah, I mean, so much information, It take a lifetime to hear it all.
When you think of Roy Haynes, what is something that um, you are paying attention to right now these days when you listen to him? Like, because also sometimes our perspectives and focus changes, and I'm very interested in different learning and also listening perspectives.
Totally. I mean, again, his flow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like how his flow he's another branch that should be checked. And actually, his flow was very instrumental and inspirational to Elvin and Tony
Mm-hmm.
Williams and Jack DeJohnette.
Checked.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like
Mm-hmm.
there's certain things of how he was making. It's like how is he making the time move? Because Roy Haynes didn't even really deal with, like I mentioned, the ride cymbal, but his ride cymbal wasn't like a steady ching 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 ching. His ride cymbal was syncopated the whole time, but
Yeah.
yet it still was flowing though.
Yeah.
That's what you want to be listening for, because actually, and that's why this music is interesting, because as you turn the clock forward, the busier and busier it gets. You know,
Mm.
the busier and busier the playing gets. But if you listen to those guys, it's not really busy in that way. There's
Mm-hmm.
always a certain amount of space. Tony
Yeah.
Williams, Elvin Jones. There's always like there's a breath. There's the ride cymbal is always flowing. The ride cymbal doesn't get compromised when they start doing whatever it is they're gonna do. You know,
Mm.
Whereas I feel like today it's more like when somebody's going to what they're gonna do, it's like, all right, let's put the flow on hold for a minute. Now I'm gonna go into my thing. All right, let's go back.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
It's not connected, in such a way,
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of that has to do with if everything is like a digital approach, you know, ones and zeros, it's that's more of a stiffer realization, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whereas analog, you know, um, it's a warmer, more fluid kind of thing. So I think you can get in the cracks another kind of way.
Yeah.
It's not as pixelized.
Yeah. And here we are having a conversation on a
On a
digital
digital
platform.
screen. Well, everything has its place, and
Yeah.
everything in the right context, in the right manner can be happening. But when you
Mm.
overdo it, then it's like if we was playing, that'd be a whole nother thing, you know.
It's true. Yeah.
That would be way more challenging.
Yeah.
But they already told us this was coming when Star Trek came out back in the '60s.
It's true.
The Dick Tracy comics back in the '60s, before any of us was born. They had all this TV on your watch and all of this stuff, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, so I already
Yep.
knew it was there. They're just rolling it out for us now.
Greetings. My name is Sam Amadon, and you are experiencing the Pablo Held Investigates podcast. And I am experiencing the Pablo Held Investigates podcast as I do every week. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to go so deep with Pablo and the musicians he talks to. I go back and forth between the conversation, and I'll pause and go to listen to the musical examples, and then I'll return to the conversation. It's profoundly beautiful and enriching. And if you connect with this podcast as much as I do, I highly recommend that you support Pablo on Patreon, because it keeps the podcast going and it provides a whole backdrop to a whole other dimension of the investigation. There's two tiers. There's a general listening podcast supporting tier, which has background materials and other stuff around reflections on Pablo's listening. And then there is a more of a practicing instrument lesson type tier, which is even deeper and more specific. I hope you support it and check it out, because these are the kinds of things that keep the world turning at this time in our universe. See you out there in the investigation zone with Pablo.
I was just thinking, in the past days, of course, I was even more listening to you than before. You know, I always like when I have these conversations coming up to really focus on that artist that I'm going to talk to, checking out old favorites and going to listen to new things that I hadn't heard before. And I'm curious if you can relate to this, but after a while of listening to you in this very, very focused way, there's been 1 or 2 weeks like where I was in Eric McPherson land. Kind of felt like I've played with you already in a way, you know, although I haven't, but I've really been very, very close to you, although it was captured in a certain time, in a certain moment on tape or on video. But I'm just trying to pick your brain a little bit, how this heavy listening experience, how this is for you with your favorite artists, and how it makes you feel, basically.
Man, I feel blessed, you know, every time I hear these people play, you know, because it's like I feel like it's feeding me, you know, it's feeding me, man, and you can go back and listen to something and hear things that you didn't hear before, you know, and it's like, whoa, you know, and that's kind of a lot of that is happening now too. You're listening back to things that I hadn't, you know, because like I said, there's so much music, you can't hear it all, you know. But then, you know, you hear stuff where you might have pockets of things that you like or you're checking out, you know, and yeah, just going back, I mean, to be honest with you, I go back and I listen to stuff and you just see the craftsmanship, you know, the craftsmanship and the originality of all of these, you know, and it just reinforces that, you know, when you listen to these people, you know, it's like all the information, all the building blocks are there, you know, and not to do it what they did, but to do what they did in that find your voice, you know, and so I think it's important to always be listening, you know, and always checking. It's like you can never get enough, you know. It's like you go back and listen, you know, because also too, your hearing is always evolving and developing. So it's like something that you listened to 20 years ago, you listen to it now, and it's like, man, you know, sounds different, you know. You're hearing it differently. When I listen to those people, man, I feel you feel good, man. It's like something, I don't know, it's like I'm being recharged, you know. I could hear some bird and it's like, man, that shit is happening to me. I don't hear what year it is or nothing like it. It's happening, you know. It's like, well, that shit is happening. Not to mention, it's like I haven't heard nobody play nothing like that today anyway. You know what I'm saying? So if we want to talk about modern and all of this, it's like, well, what is that really? You know, really, we're just talking about understanding and being in tune, you know,
Yeah.
and being able to connect with others. You know, at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, if you got to play with other people, then you have to have certain mediums where you can come together at, you know.
Yeah.
So
Being able to listen.
yeah, and apply yourself, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it comes down to at the end of the day, you know, how you want the groove to be and all of that, you know, that's again that's situational, you know. It could be a, you know, thing, or it could be a thing where you lay some stuff down and then they chop it up and put something together. You know, there's so many ways that the music can come together, you know.
How did the music come together on the Timelines album by Andrew Hill?
Oh man, it's funny they say that, man. I was just checking that out like last night, you know, randomly too, because I was just like
Wow. Okay.
on YouTube, you know, and it was there, and I just clicked
Mm-hmm.
on it, you know, just curiosity, you know.
Yeah.
It's like wow,
I listened to it too yesterday and today and the days before.
yeah,
I love that album.
yeah, wow. I'm so grateful for that experience, you know, because it's like those are the guys that really define what I'm talking about. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's like in a nutshell, it's like yeah, these guys, you know, it's like when you hear him play, it's like it's him, you know. There's no denying it. You don't confuse him with Bud Powell or Monk, or but he's coming out of those guys. But you
Mm-hmm.
know, so this is exactly what I'm talking about, you know. But he
Mm-hmm.
went in the direction that he wanted to go into, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. That session. Actually, I don't think the studio that we recorded that in is there anymore either. It's that studio in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Is it the Bennett
Yeah,
studio?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was this one,
Mm-hmm.
and they have. It was almost like a open recording almost. I was kind of in the booth, but out of the booth, and
Mm-hmm.
Andrew, like everything was kind of. And if you listen to it, like you could hear the drums sound like you're hearing it from a room mic.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like, um, yeah, and that was early too, because when I first started to play with Andrew, it was a learning experience. Like you know, it's like I remember the first hit I did, and I looked at John like, you know, like what tune are we gonna play or what should I do? And he looked at me like, man, make something happen. You know,
Great.
which was cool because I'm already inclined in that area, you know. So it was like, oh man, yeah, this is right on my alley as far as like you know now you can put whatever your musicality, you know, put it to work, like you know. Um, and the cool thing about with Andrew is like you know the charts are there, the music is there, but and it's but it's like there's so many different ways that the music can move, you know. So like to what you were talking about before, it could be metric or it could be rubato, for lack of a better term, free, however you want to put it. You know, these are all just textures and possibilities to create effect at the end of the day, you know. Time is it's motion, you know. It's motion, you know, in the different speeds, you know, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's what we can manipulate, like different speeds and different tonalities and things, you know. Yeah, shit is like magic, man. It's magic. Music is magic.
How new were the songs for you when you recorded this album? Did you play them live before?
I think when we did that record, I might have played one or two hits. I think we played at the Birdland.
Mm-hmm.
We played at the Birdland, and then it was like at that concert, then out of that concert, then that recording came out of that, which would end up being one of his last recordings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we were actually supposed to do a trio recording with him, actually, but then
Oh, great.
he passed
You,
away.
John, and him?
Yeah, but he passed away just before. It was like we played a concert in this church.
I saw it yesterday.
Yeah, we played that, and that was like surreal, man. If you hear
Beautiful.
you hear the beginning of that, it's almost like my man is playing like his own like eulogy kind of thing. You know, it was crazy, man. That hit was surreal. You know, big cavernous, like. So we were supposed to right after that. That was basically his last hit. That hit, and then he passed away like maybe a week, if that, after that. You know. But I'm grateful for that experience because it's like those are the people that you want to rub shoulders with. You know. I got lucky. I got lucky twice. I got lucky a couple times. You know, just with them kind of guys. You know.
Yeah.
Dude was born in the 30s, you know, so it's like these guys, they, saw Charlie. I mean, he played with Charlie Parker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was around.
Did he tell you about it?
I might have asked him once about Bird, and what did he say? He was saying he was distraught or something, you know. He keyed in on. I mean, Bird was dealing with some heavy stuff, you know. It's like we kind of get like the Disney, you know. We don't really get the true nature of what those guys were dealing with, even especially when you take into the country, the times in the country, all of that. On top of that, and then just those guys would know when the drugs were introduced and those people were doing it. Those guys didn't know what the long-term effects of that stuff was gonna do.
Yeah.
You know, that was like early on. Those were like the first guys to really check that stuff out. You know, now we know. You know, now we know, but you know, so and Bird was in the mix early, young. You know, I mean, think about it. I mean, he died before the age of 40.
Yeah.
You know. So, you know, those guys were living hard lives, you know. Like wasn't glorious, you know, didn't have a whole lot of money and all of this kind of stuff, you know. Yeah. He was living hard, real life, but it was like the music was carrying him through, you know. The music was carrying him through, man. I don't even know if he would have been able to be here if not for that.
When Andrew Hill showed you a new piece, or maybe for the concerts, or especially this recording, how did he? What happened?
No instruction. Figure it out, you know. It's like it's really like you know. It's like you have to step. It's like time to step up and use your faculties, you know. It's like, no, you know, what are you going to bring to the situation? You know, this is what's happening. What are you going to bring to it? That's totally what it was. You know, the only instruction actually I got once is we were doing a concert, and actually it involved a larger ensemble. It was like, he had this record called Passing Ships that he recorded, I think it was in the 70s. It didn't come out until like 2000 and something, you know? And so we played this concert of that recording. So he had this like nonette, you know, and the trio, and we're playing, you know, and just me, I'm trying to facilitate the group and try to do things to try to help them with their, you know, help the horns and stuff. But then at some point, Andrew came to me, he's like, no, you know, you let them, they'll figure it out. You just do, like, you know, you just play and do whatever you're going to do, and don't try to accommodate, you know, and worry about what's happening over there. You know, that's the only instruction that I ever got from him, you know.
Cool.
So it's kind of like, okay, you know, every man for himself.
Yeah.
Collectively, of course. You know.
On this album, there's some pretty interesting grooves that somehow sometimes seem like there's one little beat missing that you expect there, like subtracting things, you know. And I'm wondering how specific his charts were in terms of the rhythmic things when you think of those grooves.
I mean, again, like the charts were all there, but I think all charts in general is just a reference anyway, you know. And what that was really a reference, and then depending on, because that situation was unique in that there was time, but there wasn't time, and it was happening at the same time. You know, it's like it could be either or together, you know, but it was conscious, you know. It was like it wasn't loose, you know, if that makes any sense, you know, because like I said, the tune is moving, people are soloing, there are changes, you know, so you really have to apply yourself, you know, and then at that point it's creativity, it's imagination, and it's listening, you know, ears, man. It's like you really need to be listening then, you know, so that what you're doing can be cohesive to what's happening, you know.
Tell me something that we should pay attention to when we listen to Andrew Hill.
Man, endless possibilities, man. You know, like that's what I'm like. Okay, this is possible. You know, this is a possibility. You know, this is a texture that can be achieved. You know, and then you take from that whatever you like, whatever effect that I got from playing with Andrew is like it stuck with me. Like it's part of what I do now. You know. Actually, I mean, every situation you play in, that's gonna happen. You know.
Yeah.
Especially too if it requires something and you have to apply yourself a certain way, and it's like that might be a little bit different than other situations that you were in. You know, and definitely that situation was, while the conceptually wasn't like new, but I hadn't really been in a setting quite like that where it was like, you know, like this is what's happening like on every tune, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and then later I did some things with that were based off of like improvisation, you know, some things I did with like Chris Davis and Stefan Crump, and then some other stuff I did with James Hurt and Dwayne Eubanks and Taurus Mateen, where it's this, where that's the concept. The concept is spontaneous composition, you know, spontaneous arrangement, you know. So that's another side of the equation too, you know. So the Andrew situation wasn't quite that, because there were tunes and stuff like that, you know, but a lot of the sensibilities, you know, that I gained from there definitely came with me to other situations, or even situations that weren't based off of that kind of spontaneity, you know, like for example, because with John, I did some work with John with the piano player Fred Hirsch, and a lot of the stuff that happened, or the rapport that I developed with John and there, like it came with us, you know, it came and infused into that situation, you know.
Yeah.
And manifested in that. But that's a whole nother situation though, right? It's a different side of the equation. So, you know. So yeah. So it's like, you know, how do you apply yourself into something else but still be you, you know, still be true to you and what you're trying to hear, but also, you know, achieve what it is, you know, whatever that musical situation might be, you know.
Yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon, because there's a lot of bass and drums pairings in music that are sometimes called for a certain thing, and sometimes just not maybe for a certain thing, but like a vibe communal thing that the particular bassist and drummer have, you know.
Oh,
Like
totally.
that's a nice example that you played with John, with Fred Hirsch and Andrew Hill. Like how does it translate? That's interesting.
Yeah, so that mean, but anytime you work with anyone, then the rapport is gonna go with you. Like I've done stuff with I did a lot of at one period of playing with Ben,
Yeah.
and then once we had it, once after that situation, then it's like, any situation, if like meet up with Ben, it's gonna be fun and happening,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your relationship with him,
yeah, no.
actually.
Well, if I drink wine, it's because of him. Him and Mark. If I drink wine, it's because of them dudes, man.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, certain musicians, you just will it'll be a natural chemistry, or like, it's like, yeah, it just works, and with Ben, um, I played with him, I think probably first with Kurt and those guys at a period, and then after that, in a number of different situations, probably most recently with David Vireles,
Yeah.
and did the recording with them. That was
That's a
fun.
beautiful album.
That was fun, um, uh, so that was cool because that was the second time that I got to record with Ben. I think one other time I did something with him with Tom Harrell and Ethan Iverson.
Right, on ECM, huh?
Yeah,
Um,
so
mhm.
so those are the two times I got to, but I got a pile of bootlegs though.
Mhm. What are the things that you really appreciate about his playing and his musical approach?
Well, I mean, he listens. He's got big ears. And he's like a thoughtful musician. Thoughtful musician. He's playing. It's like he's playing notes, thinking about, what kind of note combination will go with this part of a melody or that part of a tune. Different rhythmic things. Or he'll throw in. He's not afraid to go off the beaten path, so to speak.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but at the same time, it's like uh, it's a strong foundation, like the bass sound, it's like something you can really like lock in with. Actually,
Mhm.
I did a project with Ben and John playing together with David. So that's something that it's not it's yeah, soon to come. Soon to come.
I see.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
yeah. That's something that should. So that was fun, seeing how that blended together,
When you were talking about your time with Andrew Hill, I was wondering, like, when we have these moments with people that we revere, we take in every moment very intensely, and I haven't gotten to play with somebody like Andrew Hill, but like when I get to play with somebody who I admire, in such an intense way, I pay attention. Like I feel like all my senses are heightened, and I have after years, when somebody then asks me about a certain kind of experience, I'm happy that I get asked about this because it makes me remember and relive these moments a little bit. So what I'm curious about is, like, what are the things that you think back to what Andrew said to, or in a conversation with others where you were present, to you, um, that you that are ingrained in your head, like pieces of advice or general thoughts that became important to you.
I mean, for me, it was more just the whole experience itself, and the whole experience itself, and also just watching him move, especially at that time, because I mean he had like a he had a he was dealing with a fatal condition, you know, and my man was like going on the road, you know, with oxygen tanks, you know, would play a set and then have to go on the oxygen tank, you know, to get air and then go. It's like, man, I think most people wouldn't have done what he did. You know, I mean, one of the bravest. Just like he was in it to the end. You know, like he was going until he could not go anymore. Literally, you know, like to the point where he couldn't like have the energy to stand up. Like he was going, you know, and so I mean, that's what I took from. I was like, wow, man, like this is like superhuman, really, you know, on the road in Europe and like having to call and make sure there's an oxygen tank over here, and you know, and me and John were right there with him, like you know, trying to help and facilitate, make it as smooth as possible, you know. But I mean, how smooth can you make having to mess with that kind of stuff, you know? But
Yeah.
so I mean, yeah, just the bravery and just the you know, he was like relentless, you know, to the end, you know. It's like that kind of musicianship and just trying to get it, man. Regardless of it's like how, regardless of how you might be feeling, you know, and still trying to
Mm.
rise above that, you know. Um, so it's like, man, I see that kind of stuff. It's like there's no excuses, man. It's like you have to keep like, no matter how difficult you might think something might be, or this or that or the other, it's like you have to just keep pushing through and follow through, you know, follow through, you know, and luckily with the focus of music, you know, there's something where you can, you know, focus and actually follow through with something,
Mm.
you know, but yeah, that's what I would say, taking from working with Andrew was just,
Mm.
yeah, he was a brave spirit, man. Like, and most people wouldn't leave their house, you know, with this
Yeah.
kind of thing. You wouldn't be able to catch up with them, you know. It's like
Mm-hmm.
he was like, even that concert, you know, that last concert, I mean, he had oxygen tanks and stuff, you know, happening. And that was like kind of last of the strength that he had, you know, to be able to do that. Because it takes a lot of strength just to sit here and talk on the computer, you know.
Mm.
We take it for granted just because it's like we can functioning properly, you know. But like
Mm-hmm.
any kind of thing, man, it's like just to sit up, it's like you can't do it, you know. So yeah, I feel very, very uh, fortunate. That was like the bookend experience, you know. Jackie McLean was at the beginning, and then Andrew was at the end, and there was all this other community work in between, you know.
Yeah.
So it's all just like it's serious journey experience, you know, of being able to play with master musicians, you know, apprentice kind of, and then be able to
Mm.
play with like your peers and that kind of thing, you know.
In what way did Jackie McLean teach you?
Man, how didn't he teach us? He was in an institution, you know, excellent teacher, you know. I learned the history of the music from him, you know.
In what way did he talk about it a lot, or
Yeah, well, he taught
just also
a
through his
class.
playing?
He taught a class of history, you know, where he taught the class, and he started the class from the beginning of man, and then he brought it all the way up to modern day, and then he correlated a lot of the developments and things that were happening in the music to different things that were happening in society, You know, it's a unique perspective. And he kind of laid it out just as it happened, you know. And he never talked about himself. And it was like, so the focus, it was about the history, you know. He wasn't like promoting
Mm.
himself, and he was just he taught the history as it happened. And so that was a very important part of the experience, you know. And you know, yeah, just letting you know the stuff that you need to be aware of, you know, because he taught at Hart School of Music, you know. And I went up there myself and Abraham
Mm.
Burton, saxophone player. We went there. We grew up together, you know. I mean, he's a big reason why I play him and not Sheet Waits. You know, I grew up with those guys, you know, and they played a big role in me playing at all, you know. But we were up there together. So, for example, when we went up, you know, then, you know, that's when he's telling us about, you know, learning about the Ben Websters and the Coleman Hawkins and the Lester Youngs, you know, and the Dexter Gordons, you know, and the Lucky Thompsons, and just like the wider,
Mm.
you know, because up to that point, it's like, you know, I studied with Michael Carvin, you know, so my first quote unquote jazz record was this record called Antiquity, which is a duet record with Michael Carvin and Jackie McLean, you know.
Yeah.
And so I grew. That's the first record. You know, I came up on this record, and then there's another record that he had, New York Calling, another record that Michael Carvin did with him. But that was like a larger group, you know. And then, so, so this is the music that I first got records anyway, because actually growing up, we grew up listening to Richard Davis, the bass player, you
Yeah.
know, because that's my godfather. So actually, I grew up watching them play, watching him and Freddie Waits,
Wow.
Nasheed's father. So that's how all that, you know, that was a whole period. That was a whole period before, you know. Um, um, so then when we went up to the school, so these are the people that we knew, you know what I'm saying? So this is like formative. And now we'll go up to the school. So now Jackie McLean is starting to drop on us the broader history, you know, that we don't know yet, you know. So he definitely brought that, lots of historical you know, material. And the unique thing about it too was in playing with him was like, you know, you had to have that understanding, you know, you had to do your homework, but at the same time you couldn't be on autopilot and just like regurgitate, you know, you had to be present, you know, and bringing something that was going to push him, you know. Otherwise it was like, you know, otherwise it was going to be a problem, or you weren't going to be there, you know. That kind of
Mm-hmm.
situation, you know, it's like sink or swim. Either you produce what's necessary or they get somebody else. So um so that's the learning experience in itself, you know.
Mm.
But with Jackie, it was the, you know, the history and just the accountability, you know. I mean, things had to be a certain way, you know. He liked, and that's another thing I got from that is in terms of being able to key in on who you're playing with, you know. It's like you gotta, in order for the situation to work, you have to key in on where the people are coming from that you're playing with and achieve something that's going to be able to make that work, you know. So he had specific things that he liked, so I had to incorporate those into my playing when I'm playing with him.
What were those?
You know, so one example would be something like, you know, like the hi-hat, you know, that's not something that I necessarily did myself, but when I
Yeah.
played with him, that's something that he, so I did it, you know. And now I
Yeah.
don't necessarily do it, but it's now it could just be now it's just like, sometimes it's there, like that, depending
Mm-hmm.
on what I'm messing with, but it's not necessarily something that I'm like trying to do or want. Like I only started doing that because that was, different little or just or even how you're flowing, right? And how you're flowing. It's like everybody don't flow the same, so it's like and you there needs to be a certain yeah, if it's not flowing right, if you're not dropping the right like kind of phrasing and what's that, then it's not gonna work. One situation I can think of, like I like rivets on the cymbals, I like rivets, and that's what I had when I first went to play with him, but he didn't like rivets. So
Mm.
it's like we're like in Japan, when it was like, buy a new cymbal. Like this one I don't like, this one buy a new cymbal. It's like, whoa, I don't really have the
Okay.
money for that right now. I found another cymbal to use for the rest of that trip. But then once I learned how to play with him and know how to flow, by the end I had my rivets in the cymbal because I know how to play with him now. So it didn't matter what cymbal I had at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and I could just have the cymbal that I use anyway, you know. So but by learning how to do that with him, then that helped me be able to key in on that in whatever situation I might find myself in, because it's like, oh, everybody don't play the same, you can't necessarily do this. I mean, you could. I don't know how good that would sound, you know.
Mm.
So that's again, that's where the rapport with the musicians you play with comes in. It's like
Mm-hmm.
there's no rapport, I'm not quite sure what's gonna happen. But if there's a rapport, now you're moving together. Now anything can happen.
He also played with a lot of your favorite drummers, right?
I mean,
Did
yeah.
he tell you stories that gave you another perspective on those people?
But really, when he would talk, the most, mainly the people he would talk about, to be honest, would be like going over to Bud Powell's house, going over to
Oh yeah.
Thelonious Monk's house to learn, following Bird around,
Mm.
um, working with Blakey and
Mm-hmm.
Charles Mingus, those different experiences. But I think Jackie McLean was like a drummer and a saxophone player's body, right?
Mm.
So because he came up and played with all those people and brought, like, I think, before Tony started playing with Miles, he played with Jackie McLean. Like that's where,
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
for a minute Miles would go to see who's playing with him, and then that's who he would get for his group. That
Mm-hmm.
definitely happened for sure with Tony
A
Williams
couple of
and
times.
Jack DeJohnette.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's others.
Maybe Arthur Taylor as well, or was it the other way around?
Well, Arthur Taylor, he came up. They grew up together, right? They grew up together. Arthur Taylor might be like a couple of years older than Jackie McLean. He's
Mm.
1929. Jackie McLean is 1931. Whereas Jack
Mm.
DeJohnette is 1942, and Tony is like 1945. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
different dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
More peers, and then more of a apprentice type of situation at that point.
Yeah.
Or definitely like, all right, that was some of the, if not their first, it was one of their early hits that probably propelled them into what we know them today, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I know he worked a lot with Billy Higgins. That's someone he
Yeah.
liked a lot. Arthur Taylor, obviously, they came up together.
Did you seek out any of them of the elders to for a lesson or to
Well,
study with them in some form?
the only person that I studied with in that capacity would be Michael Carvey. You know, and then so these were just other people that you came across. I never like went with them every week to take lessons or something like that. But like, for example, with Freddie Waits, then I was
Mm.
roadieing for him all the time. setting up his drums everywhere, watching him play everywhere. So that's a different kind of lesson, And I was roadie for Michael as well. And then we would always go to see Richard Davis, and then when they would play, we would always go see them play. With Tony, we played a week at the Blue Note, so it was like I got to see him right there, playing, and then we would play, they would play, it was like so you're in it at that point, You're in.
Did you play on the same drum set, or was it different drum sets then?
No, different drum sets. Like he had his drums
Yeah.
and his road techs and stuff, and then I probably just played what they had there, like, because the Blue Note had drums, so I didn't need to bring like the whole set over there,
Yeah.
So yeah, my experience was more like, by the time I got to these people, like by the time I got to Jackie McLean, it's like, we're in it by then, it's like we're hitting, it's like there's almost like no time for asking the questions too tough, But the information was coming, because also too, the information was coming, you just get in the car from like a lobby call at 4 a.m. or something, and my man is coming with all kind of energy and stories, and you're like wiped out, probably hanging out too late the night before, just a young stupid kid that don't really know how to handle himself yet on the road properly, all of this kind of, and you're like, but the shit is coming, it's like with those guys, man, you got to get it. Yeah, it's like with those guys, man, you just got to get the information when it comes, how it comes. There's not really too many questions or asking. Like, I remember I asked Max Roach, like, oh yeah, you do this, there's no answer like that with them guys. For me anyway, that wasn't really a thing, It's like, figure it out, that kind of thing,
Yesterday I was listening to that later Jackie McLean album that you're on, Life and Love, or Love and Life.
Oh, Fire and Love. Fire and Love.
Fire, sorry. Fire and Love. I think on the second to penultimate song, there's a song that has a lot of different sections. I think it's Entrapped.
Oh yeah, Entrapment.
And there's this one section where you always go to you play on the rim of the snare or something.
Yeah, the snare drum. Yeah.
And that's such an interesting moment, because it opens up this whole world. And the cool thing that although you're doing this, everybody kind of keeps on playing how they would if you would play, let's say, normally, but sonically and creatively, it opens up this crazy world. And I love this moment. I just wanted to talk to you about this moment and just get your perspective on it.
Yeah, I think, well, that's a Renee McLean composition, and he's a prolific composer, Renee McLean. A lot of the music in that group was actually music that he wrote. And he had a knack for just having these arrangements and different. So that tune is sort of like a layering type of situation, where you have counter lines going, they go together but go against each other too. I think the snare, that's kind of lining up. Actually, everything is lining up with the bass, but I'm just kind of playing off of a different side of the bass, and the horns are playing off of a different side of the bass, and then the bass is keeping this thing here, so then it creates that, it creates that different picture right there. Yeah, that's a cool song. Yeah. Renee is prolific, man. He could have a real book of his own.
How was the dynamic between father and son in this band?
Yeah, I mean, it was they worked together, for many years already before I got there. So I mean, like I said, a lot of the music was from Renee. So I mean, in a way, he was almost like the musical director.
Mm.
In a lot of ways, because a lot of the music he wrote, and um, but Jackie McLean had a way of dressing the music up, so to speak.
Mm.
He could create arrangements and make the song come off the way that he you know get the effect that he wanted for it. Like every tune kind of have like a different its own space, its own painting its own picture, you know. And if you think about it, those guys come from that period where like arrangements, a lot of arrangements. A lot of times it's almost like a mini messengers type of situation because it would be like septet, you got all the horns, you got all the harmonies and different arrangements. That was probably one of my favorite aspects of playing with him when it would be like sextet or septet, and then arrangements. It was nice, when um, Steve Davis was playing trombone, and he's prolific at like arranging and yeah, it was good times where we learning too, though, like
You mentioned having a lot of bootlegs of personal bootlegs of your own recordings, live situations, sessions, or something. What does it do to you to listen to your own playing, and how is it part of your process?
well, yeah, that's something I just always done. Just record what you're doing so you can hear what you're doing from the outside. Once you're playing, that's one perspective. But then when you listen back, then you get another. If you're honest with yourself, you can see what worked, what didn't work, and what needs to be worked on. All of that kind of stuff. So that's something I've always done from before I ever played one gig. Just to record
Hmm.
yourself, and then so it's part of the now it's just it's a re I just do it and try to get everything possible just so I can see what I was doing.
Hmm.
um yeah, so I have stuff from every situation, a bunch of stuff from playing with McLean. And we all did it in that group. We all had a recording device, and it was like, so
Nice.
so I got it. So now it's like, 35 plus years of just like you name it, I probably got a hit somewhere with somebody, stuff with Ben and Kurt and those guys, stuff with
Yeah.
Abishai, the bass player,
Hmm.
um, Jackie McLean, stuff with Andrew, stuff with Fred, stuff with Pharoah Sanders, who you name it.
Tell me about Pharoah Sanders.
Yeah, wow, that was a great hit. That was a great tour. It was like a tour situation, and that was a great experience. I'm glad I just got as many people like that is that you can because all of these guys are gone now, you see.
Hmm.
So that means more than ever now. And Farrell, that was a great experience. Actually, it was Farrell and Ravi playing together.
Mm.
And Nat was playing bass, Nat, and I think William Henderson, who also passed away, was playing piano.
Ah, wow.
And man, I think we might have played like one or two songs a set. I think I was soloing like on average 15 to 20 minutes myself.
Hmm.
So that was just like that was fun. Um, and
What repertoire was it?
I mean, we playing tunes. I think we might have played my favorite things. We was
Hmm.
like playing some of these tunes. It was crazy too because it's like
Mm.
you playing those, actually playing those tunes and playing it with the dude who played, and it sounds like that. It's like it was kind of weird. Like yeah, it's like man, it's creepy.
Yeah. What did it do to you?
Yeah, I
How
mean,
did you handle this situation?
well, yeah, because you're like in a situation that is a particular thing, but at the same time, it's like you're you know, and I know what it is, but it's like, how do you do that? I have to listen back and see how I did that. I'm not really like, you know, you just playing at the time, but it's like, so, I mean, I'm sure there's points where it's like, man, you know, I mean, it is what it is. You know, if you're playing my favorite things and the cat is playing the chords in such a way, it's like, you know, and what are you gonna do? You know, and if you're familiar with what it is, then you go in with that flow and you listen like, man, you know, not wanting to, but then it's like you sound like this person or that person, you know.
Uh-huh.
It's hard not to sound like, yeah, it's difficult, you know. but 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 it was a great experience, man. I mean, he was doing things with the horn I didn't know he could do. You know, I mean, he was
Uh,
getting different sounds, you know, just by putting the horn close to the microphone and messing with the keys and getting different effects, like whale sound effects. And it's like, whoa, serious, man.
uh-huh.
It's like, all I know is like, when you hear guys like that, I was like, okay, yeah, he was there, you know? Like he was playing stuff, like he was always, he's Pharoah Sanders, but he was playing stuff. I was like, oh, my man was hanging with Train. Like he knew the way
Uh-huh.
he was, you know, playing certain passages and things. I was like, oh, them cats were shedding together. Like he knows what that stuff is, or you know. I was like, wow. So it's like you want to get as much of that kind of thing as possible, you know,
Uh-huh.
because yeah, by playing with those people, then you get the energy that they got from the people that they played with. You know, it's
Yeah.
that's how it works. You know,
Uh-huh.
that's the natural progression of things. You know,
Uh-huh. Uh,
that's the natural progression of things. So
but I mean, going back to what we talked about in the beginning of our conversation, it's like the more these people leave us, leave the planet, how can we tap into that?
oh, at that point, then it's like, okay. I mean, the natural progression is there. So hopefully, there's some people around still that were around those people, you know,
Uh-huh.
that are still around today. And then there are people like that, you know, but it's like you just got to know who they are now because
Uh-huh.
of all these things we were talking about, you know. You should be like,
Uh-huh.
okay, yeah, this guy, because he, you know, it should naturally just be there. But because it's a different um, dynamic that promotes whatever it promotes, you know, uh, you have to know, you know, you have to know who these people are. You know, it's like, okay, uh, you know, like Andrew, it's like who played? You mentioned Scott, he played with Andrew. You know, John played with Andrew. You know, who
Yeah.
played with this person? You know, and are they still around? You know, so it's like,
Uh-huh.
and that's not that many people. You know, because there weren't that many people left around to begin with. You know, for us to even have a chance to play with them. So I feel like yeah, I got to play with two or three of them. You know, like um on like tours or gigs or recording situations, and then even more just on other, like, you know, a gig here or something like that. You know, you get to play with different people over time, um just different situations, and you just, you know, you get something from it, you know, when you have to play with people that have more experience than you do, you know.
Yeah.
That's always a good thing, I think, you know.
Uh,
There's a lot of
did you ever, I mean, how did you deal with, I don't know if you experienced longer periods of self-doubt, and if so, how did you deal with that?
um I never really had any doubt, just because music, it's like I need it. You know what I mean? It's like I need to
Uh-huh.
do it. It's like drinking water or breathing air or something, you know? So it's like doubt does never even creeps into the equation, you know, because it's
Uh-huh.
something that it's just, it's like I wouldn't be here if not for it, you know? So it's like
Yeah.
something that I have to do, you know?
Uh-huh.
um, so doubt doesn't come in, and I'm like, And then also too, I always tell people, you got to play what you hear. Don't be afraid to play what you hear, you know. And so doubt comes from like, you hope somebody's, I mean, I hope people like what I do, but at the same time, it's impossible to please everybody. So,
Hmm.
so you might as well focus on what you're trying to do, and I find that I think people really tune into that, if you're being honest with what you're doing and and there's a positive creative intent behind it. I feel like that's what people want to see really at the end of the day, even if they don't know it.
Hmm.
It's like it's like you want to see something different. That's what it's like. Why do you know it's like, why do you go to the circus, to see, these amazing feats and stuff. So when it comes to music, it's like, man, you know, look how they're playing with these with this harmony. You look at it, playing with harmony, playing with rhythm. So it's like, really, you have to be in tune to like be able to. You have to raise your level to some degree so that you can tap in and enjoy just what's there. Like music shouldn't have to cater to anyone.
Yeah.
Because once you do that, it's that, and that has a sound. But freedom has a sound too. Freedom of thought, freedom of spirit. That has a sound. And I think that's this music that they call jazz that epitomizes that. You know, and I think that's part of the difficulty for a lot of people. It's like they're so tight holding on to like some preconceived idea what music has to be or what anything has to be. You know, that's like telling another person, "Oh no, you." That's like telling no, you need to be more like Josh. Like it's like people could only be who they are. You know what I mean? It's like nobody should have to be anybody else. No music should have to
Yeah.
be sound like it is what it is. Anybody can connect. But if you're caught up in your own head or with whatever, then that prevents you from connecting to people. You know. So
And that's the best answer against self-doubt, maybe also. Like if you're up in your head so much about I can't do that or I should do this,
yeah,
it prevents you from connecting with whatever is around you.
yeah, and then you're also not actually doing the thing because you're thinking about it. You're not doing it.
Hmm.
Like you have to do it. I mean, I can't even play if I start thinking. Like there's a thought process when I'm playing, but I'm not thinking like, oh, I'm gonna. As soon as I think, then that's too slow. It's moving
Yeah.
slower than the music is moving. So it's like you
Yeah.
can't be thinking or trying to figure that kind of thing out.
Another record that is very important to me is Like a Flower Seeking the Sun,
Man, Burno,
Myron Walden.
yeah.
What are your memories of that recording?
Well, Burno, my man Dwayne Burno is on that recording, and he's another one, and he's already gone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, that was fun. We was in the Avatar studio, which is now like Berkeley studio or something. Like they took it over. I remember we recorded. We were all in the same room, and I mean, I had fun.
Yeah. That's how it sounds.
I had fun.
That's how it sounds.
I think that's yeah. He had Kurt on that record, and Myron is another prolific composer. He writes a lot of music. So I did maybe
Yeah.
his first two recordings I did with him.
Yeah, exactly. There's also this one. What's it? Hypnosis.
Yeah, Hypnosis. Mogul
Yeah.
Miller's on that one. He's gone too.
Yeah. Yep.
So
But Kevin Hayes, he's still alive.
yeah, Kevin. But actually, there's
Yeah.
two groups on that record because I'm on the
Yeah.
one with Mogul Miller and Dwayne,
Right.
and then there's another one with Kevin Hayes and Eric Harlan,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is interesting too. You can hear it's a good just a good lesson in texture. You can hear
Hmm.
different, just like wow, like you can just hear just different approaches Very
Uh-huh.
interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like,
And what it brings out in the other person.
yeah, just that flow thing we talking about, it's everything, you know, it's
Uh-huh.
everything, the flow, whatever that is for the individual, that's the
Uh-huh.
identifying factor, you know.
Uh-huh. Such a great player.
Yeah, you know, a bunch of bass players, him, Shawnette Moffett,
Uh-huh.
who was like my man was like a Jimi Hendrix on bass and whatnot, man. It's like guys be talking about Jaco Pastorius, but I seen my man doing some stuff where I was like, man, I mean, have you ever seen him when he have like all solo bass concert? When he do
Janet
yeah,
Moffat?
solo bass
No, I haven't.
solo
No.
bass concerts, where he's got uprights and electrics and pedals, all kind of stuff, man. It's like, whoa,
Mm.
prolific,
Oh, I'll
prolific,
check it out.
prolific, man.
Did he do a solo album?
He might have a solo album. He might have one.
Okay.
I know I did 2 recordings with him. He's one of the
Yeah.
first people I ever played with when I was like maybe 3 years old.
Mm.
Like my mom brought me over to 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 his father, Charles Moffett. This is early on
Uh-huh.
because they saw that maybe I might be interested in the drums, so she brought me over to him. And and my when you're a little kid, he was the first, yeah, Shawnette, because he's like maybe a few years older, you know. So maybe now he would be, I don't know, 57 or 8 or something like that.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, that dude was playing with Tony Williams when he was like 17 or 18,
Yeah.
like he was a high school hallway legend.
Uh-huh. Can you tell me more about your upbringing with and coming up with Nasheed and learning from Freddie Waits
Yeah,
in that situation?
yeah. Nasheed and Abraham, man. I mean, that's
Oh yeah, right.
that's I mean that was the community right there. That was the community. We played all the time. At the record store. Going to the record store. Roadieing. And then there was a period when Nasheed went away to school. He went to like a boarding school. So then Abraham and myself were still playing. Then every time when Nasheed would come back, then we would play, and he went away to school. So when he went away to school, um, that's I was roadieing for his father, and then we would take care of the studio, and then yeah, man, record stores playing all the time, all the time. I mean, that's what we did. Um, Nasheed would come back and then when he come back, then we would play. He's a natural like that. He could go away and not play for like several months and then come back and be like all over the instrument, man. He's a natural, you know. Abraham's brother was a serious drummer, so I didn't have drums for like the first 7 years I played. So if I wanted to play drums, I go over to Abraham's house, and his brother would let me play on his drums, so we jam over there. Um, yeah, man, there's music nonstop, man. We go play concerts at the Jazz Cultural Theater, which was like this. It was like a venue that Barry Harris, the piano player, it was a venue he had, and he taught classes there. It was almost like a community center of sorts, and
Mm.
and actually, Jazz Cultural was like, there's a club called Smalls now, and when Jazz Cultural finished, it was like kind of Smalls kind of emerged, and a lot of the people that were at the Jazz Cultural, people like Frank Hewitt and Jimmy Lovelace, was a lot of the early musicians that put Smalls on the map, early on. But yeah, those guys, I mean, that was the community, man. So it's like with Abraham, it's like literally went to every school together from junior high school, college, you know. And so, and we're playing the whole time, all the way through, you know. So
Mm.
it's like, and then Nasheed, you know, because his father had the studio, so like we would always, when we were younger, we would go down there and play, you know. I think I first learned about a triplet from Nasheed. You know, he showed me the pattern and shit. I was like, okay, yeah, you know. He also, the first time I got hip to Philly Joe Jones was Nasheed. He played, we were like 10 years old. He was like, check this out. I mean, how many 10 years old is going to be like, yeah, check out this Porgy and Bess,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
gone. I mean, that's abnormal, you know. The Because I remember specifically because Off the Wall, Michael Jackson record was out at the time, like 1980.
hmm,
It was, you know, um, and then all the music, then just playing, we were playing all the time, and it was like, that's what it was. It was just like playing, going to see whoever you could see, you know, setting up drums, buying records, play some more, you know, rinse and repeat, you know, it was like,
beautiful.
yeah. So, I mean, those guys were huge in me playing, you know, because that was my community, you know. And then from there, we met other people and expanded. But I mean, that's the root, you know. I mean, that's the first group I played with was those guys, you know.
Mm.
So actually, I'm real like me and the Sheik could play together. We played trio, you know, because that's who was around, you know. So that's also what developed that mentality. You know, you play with, make music with who's there. You know, it
Yeah,
doesn't have to be this or that. You know, bass player's not there. All right,
yeah.
cool, we got it. You know, no piano, cool, we got it. You know, no. Mm.
I was just when my son came home from school, I was listening to your music, and I was showing him what I was doing, and he was like, "Who is this? Who's this drummer?" And I told him about you, and then we watched a small gig where it said Eric McPherson Trio and Abraham Burton and Desiree Douglas. But we start watching it, and it's only duo.
Yeah,
I'm saying only duo, and it ends up being just the two of you,
yeah.
you know.
That was a.
And it's beautiful. And my son was like, "That's the whole band,"
Yeah, that was
but we loved it.
that was that was again, that was unplanned. It was a blizzard that night. It was a blizzard that night,
Yeah,
and nobody could get to the club. Desron got there, and I was there, so we played. And then I think the second set, Stacy Dillard was around, so he joined us. We played.
yeah,
Yeah. So like I said, you gotta work with what's you never know what it's gonna be. You know, you gotta be able to make something happen. You know.
yeah. You dealt with it in a beautiful way. It sounded great.
Yeah, I remember that one. That was unexpected, but like, you know, that's how it is sometimes. You know.
Yeah. What is an album that has inspired you um, deeply lately?
That's a good question. Actually, it's not quite an album, but just the other day I was checking out this. It's a video actually. It's a video and it's called Whiz on Monk. It's a it's a drummer percussionist named Warren Smith. Um, and he did a lot of work with so many people. He did a lot of work with Tony Williams. He plays with Tony and some Lifetime stuff when he had the percussion
Mm.
and organ
Oh yeah.
and John
Okay.
Luck. That's Warren Smith. Boom, the percussion group with Max Roach, he's in that, and a host of other things. I mean, he's one of the baddest musicians alive on the planet. So
Mm.
this video is called Wiz on Monk, Warren Smith on Monk, and he's dealing with monk music, but he's playing like the percussion family by himself, you know?
Oh wow.
Man, it's some of the most creative, man, these are some creative dudes, man. It's like the level they're on, you know, it's like I'm like striving to be on that kind of a level. I mean, he's playing like monk tunes, you know, on the timpani, xylophones, marimbas, you know, gongs, cymbals, the drums. Like he just had this whole percussion setup, and he's dealing with this music, you know. And I just saw that, and that was highly inspiring, you know, and just like, whoa, man, this is unbelievable. The music that these people are playing, you know, it's like, it's inspiring. And I'm in awe of these musicians, you know, because they provided the whole template that we're moving on, you know. It's like they built the infrastructure of it, you know. So yeah, so as far as like a recording, that's the last kind of recording that I checked out, and it was this video. And man, Wiz on Monk, if you ever get a chance, man, it's like,
oh yeah, after this I will check it out.
But there's so much music, man. I'm always kind of listening to something, or there's just a lot of music just in the air, you know, like music is always happening around us, you know. There's always some rhythm or some melody happening just in just different things that are going around, whether it's a car or something like this, you know. It's always happening, you know, whether we're physically on instruments or not, you know. This existence is musical, you know. It's vibration, you know, it's vibration. And so from that perspective, you know, it's never off. It's always going, you know. But then, you know, there's things that we can key in on and to try to get more literal with it in terms of the instruments that we created to be able to tap into. Man, it's energy, you know. At the end of the day, you know, harnessing energy, positive energy. You know.
Exactly. That's what we need right now.
Exactly, man.
Thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you, man. It was a pleasure.
This was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you very much.